Welcome everyone to the Enhancing Resilience in Stressful Times webinar. I hope you can all hear me. I would quickly like to introduce Karen Ashford-Hadley and Michael Tunnicliffe, who are clinical psychologists who are going to help us and guide us through these stressful times. Before moving forward, just make sure you can turn up the volumes on your computer screens so you can hear them right. And I would now like to hand over to Karen and Michael to begin the webinar.
Hello everybody, and welcome to the webinar today on enhancing resilience in stressful times. My name is Karen Ashford-Hadley. I'm a clinical psychologist from Perth, and joining me today is Michael Tunnicliffe, also clinical psychologist from Perth. And we're going to take you through today. Both of us are going to share the presentation of this webinar. The objectives of today's webinar, we're going to look at understanding stress and mental well-being, especially during this time where we're all faced with a very different way of living with the restrictions of COVID-19. In this, we're going to review some of the adjustments that we've all had to make due to the challenges that we've been faced with, and to have an understanding of the concept of resilience in times of change. We've often talked about resilience in times of change. Usually it's been local change or change to personal situations. What we're facing during this time is really change that is greater than our scope of just the normal social interaction we have. It's also national, but worldwide. So we're talking about global change that we are all significantly impacted by. And of course, this webinar is going to look at developing strategies for enhancing that personal resilience during these times. I'm going to call upon my colleague now, Michael, to start with the information. Thanks, Michael.
Good morning, everyone. Stress is endemic in most of the things we do in our life. However, there are certain events, circumstances, and situations which will actually increase the stress for us. And so there's an important aspect about stress around change that we do need to have a close look at. Change can mean different things to different people, as we all know, and it can happen at different times. However, what it does require people to do, it requires people to act differently and do things differently. And that's not always comfortable because people like to do things the same way frequently, like to travel the same way to work, get their coffee from the same place, and all these things, when we're asked to do something different, that can generate a degree of change for us. How we deal with change will largely depend on how we view it and our ability to adapt. And as you all know, over the past 2 months, we've all had to do a huge amount of adaptation. Where you're looking at me right now, I'm working from my office at home, Karen's working from our office in our building, because we've all had to make different adaptations to how we work and how we operate. Now, what we need to be conscious of is stress is always a normal part of life as well as an uncomfortable part of life. So it's normal to experience some stress in times of uncertainty when changes occur. And this is often called adjustment stress. And adjustment stress is when the demands made on us require us to make certain adjustments to our life and how we operate. So I'll ask Karen to talk a little bit about adjustment stress now and how that works.
When it comes to adjusting to stress and change, there are many factors we need to keep in mind. We actually have a low tolerance for change. Our brain functions by routine. Our brain stabilizes with consistency, and this is really important for our security. This is a function of our brain that goes back 10,000 years. If we don't have consistency and security and routine, we move into that fight-flight response because there's a disruption to our sense of security. That is one thing that people have been faced with, is this low tolerance for change, working from different environments. They've had to adjust to that, and it's not uncommon for people to have experienced high anxiety around this time. This is a forced adaptation. once again, we have resistance to things that are forced upon us. Some people more so than others, and that can be due to their thinking style. At this point in time, people have had different reactions to understanding the COVID threat, if you like, and that's those different views that we come across. Some people have understood it from their own personal circumstances where they may have been vulnerable to the virus and therefore have followed through with the change almost from a fear response. Do what I'm told to do and then I feel safe. Other people have had that resistance because they may not have been experiencing the information in that way. They've seen that this is not a personal threat to me. And we saw some of this with the way that the younger people were behaving, in particular over Easter. And if you remember how Bondi Beach had to be shut down. So these people didn't see that as an immediate threat to them. And therefore, there was more of a resistance to change. This is exactly what our brain does. When you think about, we go into that fight or flight response. We either run away from it and get ourselves safe, or we want to fight it because we don't understand it and we don't believe necessarily that it can beat us. This, again, is that primitive part of the brain. There's also the threat to self-interest. What about my family? Some people lost their positions, their jobs. Some people's work changed and they were reduced in hours. There was a lot of fear about how this was going to impact on my life and my family. We lost control over normal tasks and roles, like Michael said, going even to the coffee shop. For some people, going to the coffee shop for them on the weekend was their way of relaxing, especially for people who live by themselves. That I was talking to one woman recently who worked alone in a remote area in a FIFO position. She'd come back home and she lived alone. So for her, her way of relaxing and re-engaging with her support network was to go to a coffee shop on Saturday mornings and watch people walk by and feel like she was part of the human race, because her work environment and also her personal environment was so isolating. Now this was a threat to her self-interest in terms of the way that she interacted and enjoyed herself on those off times. Lowered security, that goes back to what I talked about before. When we feel that there's a change coming, and we don't feel safe in that change because we don't understand what that means to us. The difficulty with COVID is that I heard on one of the government presentations that they did that this was a war. What we're fighting is a virus that we can't see, which is also why some people reacted significantly to this threat. There was a sense of, I'm not safe now. There is no security here. What if I'm catching public transport? All of these factors affect how we adjust to this stress and this change. Increased uncertainty. How long are we going to be in self-isolation for? How long is the virus going to be a threat for us? What happens now as we move into different stages of restrictions being lifted? In this, I considered that there's probably going to be two reactions here. Some people are going to burst out of their homes going, oh, I'm so glad this is over. We can just start to get to some normality again and start socializing. And people can very quickly forget the threats. They can very quickly forget the 1.5 distances and also those washing their hands and sanitizing. We can move very quickly back into old habits. That, coupled with those people who are still on high alert, still living in this increased uncertainty, even more so now because we're starting to go back into our normal life. And these two worlds, should they collide, there's going to be a few conflicts, I predict, in terms of some of the more populated areas like shopping centres, where some people are still guarding themselves and other people have forgotten and moved back into the old ways of being. So there is going to be a period as we readjust once again of uncertainty. This leads on, like I said, to those misunderstandings and communication breakdowns. those people who will still be maintaining those standards because they're quite concerned about the impact to themselves, will force upon others the assumption that you're not taking this seriously. You think you need to just go back to normal. And immediately their anxiety and their anger is going to be increased. And this breaks down those communications that for other people, it's just they've moved back into those habits. And again, they are still affected by it, but their desperation to get back to normal is overclouding that sense of what the virus still presents to us. And ultimately, we all have that lack of control over the situation. This is why the government has been instrumental in handing down guidelines time and time again, almost daily. And I'm sure with all the positions that you're working in, you would be keeping up to date with those late notices, the latest notices around what are the guidelines for today, what are we as health practitioners and in the types of work that we do meant to be adhering to. Are there any new advances in that? And how much more can I add to my practice in terms of the people that I come across? One, to help them feel safe, and also to give us a sense of control. When we feel we're out of control, what is it that I can have control over? This is really important, because when we're faced with situations where we feel out of control, we have to find something we can have a sense of control over. Now, after this, we're going to do a poll. Samira is in charge of the polls, and she's going to post the poll now. What I'd like to hear from you is, what condition do you think is commonly related to adjustment stress? So have a go at this. Do you think it's anxiety or depression, addiction, eating disorders, or post-traumatic stress? So have a go. Right, 100% of the audience are in. So, Michael, I let you talk about the answers to this. What condition is most commonly related? And on.
Well done. Yes, those of you who put down anxiety, we do know that anxiety is the most prevalent stress-related disorder in Australia. And in fact, it accounts for something like about 70% of stress symptomatology is related to anxiety. So all those who ticked anxiety, well done. But that's not to say that depression, addiction, and eating disorders are not stress-related. What they appear to be is a lower incidence of those when it's compared to anxiety. Okay, everyone, let's continue along. I want to talk now a little bit about a model that was put together by an American physician called Selye back in the late 1940s. And Selye calls this the stress adaptation model. Many of you have seen this before. It's a very, very simple model. It's been around for 70 years. But what the model says is that when events, circumstances, or situations in our environment or in our personal life set up some kind of alarm in our body, we have a part of the body really originating with the function in the brain called the amygdala, which is our protector. It sets up our fight-flight. It sends alarm signals, and it sends alarm signals to the rest of the body. What happens then is we have a very powerful part of our brain called the prefrontal cortex right at the top here. And the prefrontal cortex wants to try and calm this down and look at this a bit sensibly now, what's going on. And what we tend to do, both deliberately and automatically, we try to put in place a resistance mechanism, because when we're feeling uptight and alarmed, unless the threat is totally immediate and it's life-threatening, what will happen is we will start to resist that reaction that's taking place in the body. And by the way, the amygdala doesn't think. Even though it's in our brain, it's a part of the brain that doesn't think. It just acts. So that resistance comes into play. And that resistance is very, very important, because it's what we do to automatically manage the stress we're feeling. However, resistance can be helpful or unhelpful, and Karen will talk a bit more about that in a minute, because if you're doing things which are not helpful, you can eventually reach a crisis point. Let me give you an example. Say you know a person who is in a very, very stressful job, and they feel stressed all day at work because of the nature of their job. They come home after work every day, and the first thing they start to do is they start to drink alcohol, because that makes them feel relaxed, it makes them feel calm, it eases off the stress, the body tension. And so every night they're drinking copious amounts of alcohol. Eventually, that is going to result in a problem. That type of resistance in the short term may have some benefit, but as you see along the top line there, it will reach a crisis point, because what they're doing, we have an amazing ability to start to tolerate whatever we're doing in resistance, and the tolerance for the alcohol will increase, which means that individual has to drink more alcohol to get the same benefit, and that's going to result in the crisis, and eventually they'll just simply exhaust their resources, and down the slippery slope they go over time. So this is an important part of looking at how this model works and looking at what the implications for the model are. So let's move on to the next one, and let's have a look at, so what does that mean when we're actually in a situation where we are doing the stress adaptation? And I'd like Karen to talk about how we adapt, because it can be constructive or it can be not very constructive at all. Over to you, Karen.
Thanks, Michael. As Michael said, we do have resistance to stress, and this is part of our survival mechanism. I'd like you just to think for a moment, what is the indicator for you that alerts you to the fact that you're starting to get worked up? So just have a think about that. For some people, it will be that their heart starts to race. For some people, they might find that their stomach becomes unsettled. Others, it might be a thought that, oh, this is getting me down, or gee, I feel tired. So it might be that sense of fatigue, or it might be a thought of, oh, how much longer, I'm done with this. You know, those thoughts that tell us that we're struggling with something. So the way that we become aware that we're getting worked up is that we have cues, and each person will have a unique set of cues. So some people also might find that they start to get short-tempered. What happens then is that we automatically will go into a form of coping. And it can be as simple as getting up and saying, oh, I just need a cup of tea, I need to walk outside. This was the old days where some people used to go outside and have a cigarette. We do something to resist the build-up of the intensity of what we're experiencing at that point in time. Now, for most part, they are short-term. It's just taking a break. It might be speaking to a colleague about it, and they're usually solution-focused. I either just need to calm down and I can think clearly, or I need to get some more information to assist me, to support me in that. These are adaptive ways of resilience and dealing with resistance. However, what can happen over a period of time is that the more that I struggle with the resistance, with the problem that is in front of me, the more fatigued I become. I'd like you to think of it in terms of, if we're holding up a full bottle of water, now I can hold this for a period of time and I won't feel tired. Initially, I can hold it. It's not that heavy, but over time, the longer I'm holding this without support, the more tired my arm's going to become. And even though the water has not changed in pressure and in weight, I become fatigued at holding this. This is exactly what happens in terms of stress. The longer we hold on to the stress, the more fatigued we become. And we move away from our adaptive coping, just like this line says, to more maladaptive coping. And as Michael suggested, we then start to draw upon other things that can support us and help us through. So that one cup of tea or coffee that I would have had when I started to find myself getting overwhelmed may turn into 2 or 3 on a stressful day. And as you can imagine, when I'm having more caffeine, what then happens is it affects my sleep. So 3 or 4 cups of normal strength coffee during a day means that I'm going into my wind down time at night with caffeine still in my system. That is going to affect my ability to fall asleep. Hence why some people then will have a glass of wine just to calm their mind down. Now, we do know that alcohol is a depressant on the central nervous system. I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but when alcohol metabolizes, it's actually a stimulant. Alcohol metabolizes as a stimulant, which is why some people use it to go to sleep with, but find that they wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning feeling quite stimulated. The other thing too is alcohol is a diuretic. 1.5 glasses of any type of alcohol, one glass of alcohol will produce 1.5 glasses of urine. So it's a diuretic and it overstimulates the kidneys. Another factor to keep in mind if we're going to sleep after drinking. This, now, in normal circumstances, we're not saying it's bad to have a glass of wine, but it's when we're using it to medicate stress. This is the critical point at when adaptive coping mechanisms become maladaptive, is what am I using it for? When my words say, I need a glass, I just need to numb out in front of Netflix for the next hour. That then is creating a habit that is maladaptive and going to impact us in the longer term. Building resilience is a different way to manage more adaptive coping mechanisms, but also to delay us moving into the maladaptive. Understanding that when we're getting fatigued and tired, what we need is sleep, and being aware that I have to put the glass down because this is the glass of stress that is compromising my adaptive coping. Michael's going to take us now more into understanding what resilience is and how to build those specific coping strategies.
More than 40 years ago at university, the word resilience was not found. The word resilience was not mentioned. It wasn't a part of the psychological literature. I'm not sure where it sat at that point in time. But the important thing is that we had terms that we used instead. In fact, a famous psychologist called Arnold Lazarus wrote a book he called Hardiness. And hardiness was the in term in the late 60s, early 70s, because what people were encouraged to do is to make themselves more hardy to manage the pressures of life and to manage the pressures they were going through. But since then, of course, as we always do, we reinvent the wheel and we reinvent different things. And resilience is becoming a popular term. It's an important term because it holds a lot of important keys for what we need to be doing. Resilience, in a very simple definition, and one of the problems is you can pick up 4 or 5 books about resilience and you can find 4 or 5 definitions of resilience. The one I like is a very simple one. It says, having a set of personal strengths, skills, and abilities which help provide a buffer against stress. In other words, what you try and do is you proactively prevent situations and circumstances from becoming stressful. Resilience is really the buffer. And of course, sometimes that's not easy to do. You really find that there are certain situations and circumstances where the stress is upon you before you even realize what's happening and you haven't had time to put the buffer in place. That's when you go into stress management. Resilience is building those personal qualities, as we'll look at shortly, that help you to maintain the stress management. And as the little diagram on the right says, there's a very important underlying principle behind resilience. And the word is simply called discipline. And the discipline we talk about here is self-discipline. You really need to get yourself into a pattern, and we all need to do this, of acting in certain ways, of having certain practices and certain procedures in our life that allow us to manage stress more effectively. The person who lives the laissez-faire life, oh, I'll just take it as it comes, or I'll just see what happens, or I'll worry about it when I find it's a big problem for me, they're the people who are not going to be very successful in terms of resilience. Both Karen and I work for state police and for federal police. And one of the things we talk about when we're dealing with our police officer clients is the importance of building in some personal discipline that will help you with your resilience. So having certain practices, which we'll go through shortly, that will buffer you when you are under pressure. Because as we know, if you're in a law enforcement role, the chances of being under pressure are far, far higher than someone who's doing a different type of role. So this is important to think about, that nexus or the connection between your personal self-discipline and resilience is very much an important one. Now, before we start on going through what some of these strategies are, I'm going to ask Samira to put on our second poll. We have another poll now, and we want to get you to think about how does resilience come about. So please go ahead and answer those questions in front of you. And as you might guess, in most people, resilience is developed over time. However, I want to acknowledge the person who's here today who actually put down a genetic predisposition, because there's a slight element of truth in that. Most of us learn resilience over time. We pick up strategies, we pick up techniques, we find what works for us. But there are those people, it's not a massive number, but there are those people who do appear to be genetically predisposed to having good resilience. And you see it in different people. You see some people that are really panicky, they get upset very easily, they fall apart very easily. And you see some people that almost without effort have that ability to step back and look at it and problem solve situations and that. There's some suspicion that that might be a genetic endowment. But for most of us, for most people, it's something that we have to develop over time. And we have to look at the skills and look at the things we need to do. So I'd like to introduce I suppose, the keys to personal resilience. What are these key things? And we put down 5. And what we've also done, we've listed some more information about these 5, and we put them on a handout. And that will be sent out to you by Samira after the webinar. But the keys to the personal resilience are very important. So I'm going to hand over to Karen now to talk about the first of our keys to personal resilience. Over to you, Karen.
Key to resilience is taking responsibility. We also, in psychological terms, call this internal locus of control. What do I bring to this situation, and what can I take responsibility for? This is about that sense of understanding what I have control over. I can't take responsibility for what happens to me. I can't take responsibility for how COVID has manifested and changed our lives. What I can take responsibility over is what I am going to do about it in my world. We need to be careful not to blame others or making excuses. We're great at this, and you will probably know some people who blame a lot of other things and factors in their life for situations they feel that they have no control over. I remember, I'll tell you a very quick vignette right now about when I used to work with violent offenders, and in particular perpetrators of domestic violence. There was one client who always stays in my mind. I was running groups for domestic violence, and they were 24-week groups. This man turned up on his first night. he didn't want to be there, and proceeded to verbally abuse the other men in the group. Being a domestic violence program, I guess we should not have expected anything else, but he was quite vocal about the fact that he didn't want to be there, and he was only there because of his wife and children and, of course, the police and child protection and everyone else. But in fact, in terms of his own behaviour, there was nothing wrong with it. I didn't think he was going to last, but he did. And he came each week, and each week for approximately 15 weeks, he would resist any responsibility in terms of his behaviour and the difficulties he was facing in his life. And then on the 15th week, he turned up and he sat quietly. And I knew something had shifted in him, despite along the way his resistance to it. And when he spoke, he said that he had started to realise all the things in his life. He recognised that his wife had left him because of his behaviour, that his children hated him, that he had no friends left, that the police were after him because of his behaviour. And even his doctor had said, if you don't calm down, you're going to have a heart attack. And his words from that were, he realised there was one common denominator of everything else in his life, and that was him. And the moment that he saw that he had an influence over all the things that had happened to him, that was the point at which his life actually started to change. It's like we go towards a brick wall and keep saying, I don't want this wall to be here, I want it to move away, and we try with our bare hands to punch it down, to hit our head against it, when in actual fact the wall is never going to move. But if we step back and realise that the wall is there, I can't change that, but what I can do is commit to a different approach. And this is where it's about being decisive. Take responsibility and then decide, what are my actions going to be, and what are the best ways of approaching this now that I take back perspective of what I can control, instead of making justifications and assumptions around what I think and who I think is in control and to be blamed for this.
Another important aspect of resilience. And reflection really means a bit of introspection, thinking about yourself, thinking about how you operate, thinking about where you put your priorities. And this is a really important part of it, because so often we spend a lot of our life outside of our head, looking at our environment, looking at the people we're interacting with, looking at our surroundings, dealing with the problem I have in front of me right now. But reflecting back on how you handle things, what you do and what you don't do sometimes, is particularly important as a tool for building resilience. I think the first one that's very essential is to think about your priorities. How do you prioritize your time? How do you prioritize your day? Some of you would have had the experience where you, getting towards the end of the day, and you think to yourself, I haven't been really, really flat out, but I don't think I've got much done. And the important part is that that can happen when you're in a highly, highly reactive role, and the time just simply overwhelms your tasks and activities you've got to do. It's also important, but no matter what your role is, to think about some priorities for your day. And the other thing I always say to people, do not leave them up there in your head. When you think about priorities and they're just in your head, they are going to go away. I believe it's really important to have your priorities written down, have the key things you need to get done in writing. It might be on a pen and paper. It might be on a clipboard. It might be on a whiteboard. It might be in your phone. It might be on your computer. It doesn't matter where it is, provided you actually write those priorities down. The next point's a very important one too. There is no one here that has not made a mistake. we all make mistakes at some point in time. And one of the things that happen is sometimes those mistakes can be relatively minor and have few consequences. Sometimes we can make mistakes that have far more significant consequences, if not for other people, but they can be for us. And what we often do, and I see this a lot in my clinical work, people who've made mistakes in their life, and it may be 3, 4, 5 years later, and they're still dwelling on those mistakes. They're still allowing those mistakes to dominate their behavior and dominate their life. One of the important things is, and we all know this and we've all experienced this, you cannot go back and change the past. All you can do is influence the future. So I try to get people to think about, sure, that was a terrible thing that happened. Sure, it really messed up. It did create these problems for you. But I always ask the simple question, what have you learnt from that? What did you learn? And if you can ask yourself, what did I learn? And then once more, I find it really essential, write down what you learned, because you've got to reinforce that message. I was at a conference in Los Angeles one time, and it was a psychology conference. And I recall one of the presenters saying one of the biggest problems around stress and anxiety was people keep repeating their mistakes. They don't learn from them. And he said one of the most essential things you can do to buffer yourself against stress is to make sure that you have reminders so that prevent you from continually repeating the mistakes. And he pulled out a little notepad and he says, you know what I do? If I've made a mistake, I write it down. But I find it easy to write in a notepad. I just write it down to remind myself, and I check it out every now and again, because in that way, I make sure that I don't make the same mistake twice. Or if I do, I'm pretty aware of where I'm at and what's happening with the situation. Okay, Karen, over to you.
Are creatures of connection. We need to have a sense of belonging, and we need to feel supported by someone and supportive to someone. That is the way that we operate. That goes back once again to that part of the brain that kept us alive for 10,000 years. When we're going through difficult times, it is important to note who are those people in your life that you care about and you know support and care for you. We've been challenged by this, in particular with the self-isolation. Some people, our more introverts, have enjoyed the peace and quiet, and our more extroverts have found it difficult. So we've all got different ways of how we manage connection. But I'm recognizing who's important in your life. What are the support networks you have? The other interesting fact that's come about is working from home, we don't have those contacts with the people that we normally would in our work environment. I spoke to someone recently who's a high introvert, and she said, my world hasn't changed. I don't go out much anyway, so being at home and working from home haven't affected me. Yet she was in a very bad state mentally. Her depression had significantly set in. And she couldn't understand why when she felt, well, I'm an introvert, I like being alone, and really nothing's changed, until I said, you go to work every day. And even though you like being alone, that office interaction, just people being around, just those moments of people checking in on you, or being able to reach out when you were stuck on a specific task or role, were really important connections, even though she didn't realize it. So that has been a significant impact on all of us in terms of the relationships in our life. When we look at building resilience, we need to understand how they form that safety net underneath us. For some people, there will be those key people in their life who they know they can always rely on, friends or family, other professional people in their life and colleagues, but also connection can be to other things as well that keep us healthy. Connection to nature, to the arts, to hobbies, to animals and pets, these relationships and connections are just as critical, because sometimes when we're going through difficult times, and this is another area that I've found through the COVID restrictions, people tend to let go of those resources and connections that actually are anchoring them to living their life more productively. Like I said about the person I spoke to who worked in isolation, lived in isolation, connecting to the social world by going and having a coffee on a Saturday morning at a coffee shop and watching people go by was really important to her managing her mental health. We don't realise how important these are until one by one they start to fall away. And then we have to put them back one by one. They're only fine threads, but those fine threads intertwine to make a very, very strong safety net. Michael.
Recoil. And the first thing I want to say is Recoil is about recovery. It's about bringing yourself back to a state of operation, a state of ability to function if something has happened in your life. Now, first and foremost, you've got to acknowledge misfortune. It doesn't matter what happens in life. You cannot get through 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years of life without having a misfortune happen around you. And we all know that because most of us, I'm sure here, have lost close friends, family members, parents, siblings, even a dog, cat. They're very significant events. And yet there's a problem sometimes where part of our society says you have to be tough, you have to be strong, you have to just get on with it. And having spent quite a number of years as a police psychologist, I found that when I was working with police officers, been through some of the most horrific events and had to do with some of the most horrific circumstances, and we go up and talk to them, and a police officer say, "No, mate, I'm fine." They're not fine. And one of the things that you can happen if you don't acknowledge what events, situations, and circumstances that could indeed be tragic have had on you, you can actually make it worse. So acknowledging misfortune means accepting where you're at. How do you feel about it? What's happening to you physically? What's happening with you mentally? What's happening with you emotionally? Just a little bit of self-analysis is really important because it does give you some insights as to how you're coping and how you're not coping. You need to make some plans to move on. Life is a dynamic process. In other words, it's continuously moving. Nobody stays in the same place. And in fact, you are a different person today than you were yesterday and the day before. The differences may be minute, but we are continually changing. And part of making plans to move on is to making some decisions about what do I need to do in my life to become better functioning at my life. Now, I'm not saying these decisions have to be made in a hurry. Sometimes they can take quite a while to make those decisions and put those plans into place. I've had a very, very close friend whose husband died last year, and she's taken some time to make her decisions and to move on and to take the next steps, and that's fine. But she's always known those plans are in place, and she's always needed to follow through with that. People will be concerned about you. We all have a network of people who are what we call family and friends who show us concern. Even workmates and colleagues will show concern. I really think it's important to do other people the respect of acknowledging their concerns, because sometimes when people come up and say, "Look, I've heard what's happened. How are you keeping? Are you okay?" "Yes, I'm fine, I'm all right," and brush them off. I think, to me personally, that's disrespectful. I think we we don't need to necessarily engage deeply with those people, but we need to thank them for their concern. Thanks very much for taking the time to talk. Thanks very much for checking in. I think that's really important. And for some events in life, they are really significant. They have really impacted in a powerful way. I think there are times when you need to seek some professional help. professional help is not a sign of weakness. It's not a sign of an inability to manage your own affairs. In fact, sometimes a very important managing of your own affairs is to seek help from other people. So I think you need to just be conscious that there is professional help there. There are people who can give you new insights, new ways of looking at things, new strategies to manage the stress you've experienced, and seeking that is certainly not weak. I think sometimes seeking that is a sign of strength and one that you really need to take over. Karen.
Thank you, Michael. Absolutely. I just want to highlight that some people, and you've probably come across this, I know I've worked with people from your organisation on some of the mine sites, and you'll come across those who come in for support and physical discomfort, and you pick up that this is actually stress or psychological issues. The last thing they want to do is seek professional help because they see that as a weakness and I should be able to deal with this. I like to go with the motto, you don't have to be sick to be better. And when I talk to people about getting extra professional help, I say that, you know, we can always be better than where we are. We can always keep growing. And I use that more so than saying it may be that you're under a lot of stress and you can't cope. It's more likely that you could learn so much more than what you know now. But what I want to talk about now is recreation and relaxation, because we are heading towards that time frame where our time is nearly up. This is important. We need to have that balance in our life. In particular, it might have been a bit of a struggle over working from home or some of the restrictions that have been put on us. Those people who put themselves first would have found different ways to overcome that. And that's what I found in talking with some people. They said, oh gosh, the gym's shut, therefore I'm just going to allow myself to relax for 5 weeks and pick it up at the end. And other people said, no, I'm going out running, I can still do that. What I noticed with that was that it wasn't about the event, it was about their sense of care and duty to themselves around exercise. What I mean is that some people see the gym as an event. I know I have to exercise, I don't really want to, therefore I go to the gym and that gets it done. Again, this is that external and internal locus of control. If I'm really more focused on the fact that exercise is critical to my mental and physical health, I'll do it, no matter where it is or no matter how it needs to be done. We need to use our time well. We need to look at the balance. Sometimes we'll find, especially if we've got family and young children, our personal time is limited. Even more so why we need to make sure that we use it well. Distraction activities, those things that just take us out of our world for a little bit. Colouring in is a great one, and you can use that as a mental switch off. We run an addiction program here, and the first thing we do within the first 2 weeks of someone joining is we give them a colouring in book. You need to switch off. Using adaptive strategies. Yes, TV can be a switch off technique in moderation, not you know, sitting on the couch and numbing out to 5 seasons on Netflix. That's avoidance. We need healthy and adaptive ways of coping. Listen to your body. What does your body need? Does it need a massage? Does it need a stretch? Does it need a run? Even in terms of food, and you will know this from the people and your clients that you've come across, clearly you can see that there are certain things they are doing and that they are eating and how they're living their life that is really counterproductive to their best mental and physical health. But they don't listen to their body. Most of the people go, it just gets me from A to B. We need to listen to the signs, the aches, the pains, and even just the discomforts of what it's telling us. Learning to relax through meditation and mindfulness. As Michael said, the handout that you've got really does go into a little bit more detail. And if you are wanting some more information on some distraction and mental switch off techniques, or even different ways to learn to relax, please make contact with us and we can give you some resources. Activity builds balance in your life. Another thing you've probably heard quite a lot is when people have a very very physically demanding work, and they say, I don't need to exercise, my job is that. I often say to people, no, that's different. Your activity and exercise regime needs to work differently to your job. We don't get away with it that easily. So rest and relaxation, recreation are critical to that balance of building resilience.
Move on. We've got our final poll that Samira's put up. And what we want to know is, which of these keys do you consider the most important for you? The 5 keys we've just talked about, everyone. Can you please indicate on the poll?
Great. So 100% of the audience have answered, and recreation, relaxation, and it's going to be different for different people. So there's no right or wrong here. It's recognizing where do I start in building resilience. So Michael, do you want to go on with
I'll just mention that the difficulty with a poll like this, I'm sure most of you thought, well, there's 3 there that I think are really important for me, but I can only vote for 1. So sure, I think it's important. All you've really highlighted what you think is the most important one. But what we do know is, of course, that there's more than that that's essential for you to get involved with. Okay, let's have a look at our final slide, which is about resilience has to become a habit. Once at a conference overseas, I met a chap who was giving a presentation on stress, and his name was Andrew Golisek, and this goes back a lot of years, probably about 30 years ago. And Andrew had written this book called Breaking the Stress Habit. And one of the things points he made in his presentation was that people tended to get into the habit of being stressed. Stress wasn't just a consequence of what was happening in their life. They started getting into the habit of being stressed all the time. And once you get into a habit, it becomes an automatic process in the brain and very, very hard to break. So he put a book together about how to break out of this stress habit. And one of the things I think is important, because I've taken this from Andrew's book, but I've turned a little bit around to say, what do I need to do to build and maintain my resilience? And I distilled it down to 4 things. First of all, resilience is important to work at. And as we said, a small number of people have some natural genetically endowed resilience, but most of us have to look at, where do I need to get things better? Where do I need to build up my strength? So I think the first part is to make a plan, put a plan together. Now, the plan might be simply around some of those tools we were just talking about. It might be around making sure you exercise regularly. It might be around learning how to switch off, linking in with family, or even linking in with colleagues or professional people that you know can give you good advice and mentoring. It might be around taking some time out to do some self-reflection. But I think you have to have a plan, and you've got to write it down. I saw a quote, and I can't say where it came from because I don't know, but the quote actually said, when you write a plan, when you write something down, it becomes a plan. When you keep it up there in your head, it's just a wish that you hope will happen one day. So I firmly believe in writing things down, because you turn something that is a mental energy into a concrete entity. And then, of course, you've got to build in some reminders. And I won't turn my computer around, but if you were to see the desk area behind where I'm behind my computer, you would see a whole stack of Post-it notes. And for me, Post-it notes are just tools, but I use them as reminders. I write Post-it notes, I put them in books, I put them on monitors, I put them on printers. But for me, they're the monitors, reminders. As soon as I get them done, I just take them away. because, and I've got very economical too, because one large Post-it note can be divided into 3. But I just have these different colours. They stimulate the brain. They set up reminders for me, and they help me to stay on task. And staying on task is a very, very important part of maintaining your resilience. And the final one is to build in some rewards for yourself. Now, I'm not saying that these rewards have to be major, massive, or regular, but what you have to do is work towards goals. How will I know when I've reached that point? How will I know when I've achieved that outcome? How will I know when I've got to where I'm feeling satisfied with that situation? And when you have outcome points or outcome determinants, I think it's particularly important there to decide, what will I do to remind myself? And it may even be go for a walk outside. I'm very fortunate, just over the road from my house where I'm working, I have a park. I'll just get the dog, go over to the park for 10 minutes and come back. For me, that's very rewarding. So what you need to have is a way of building a system that is going to help you to maintain the resilience and maintain the things that are going to be helpful for you. Okay, Karen, did you want to add anything to what I've just said on those? Because we're going to move to some questions.
No, I think
let's move to some
done
questions,
for time
everyone.
now.
Have people got questions they'd like to ask? And we could do it through the chat screen here we've got.
I will leave it to you,
Okay.
Samira, to guide us from here.
Thank you, Michael and Karen. That was really informative. One question that was pre-submitted was, how long does it take to develop a habit, and how do you manage stress while also managing children now that we're living in this COVID world? What strategies do you have for us?
I might leave that with
Okay.
Karen, because she's got children and grandchildren around. So over to you, Karen.
I think the first thing is, how long does it take to develop a habit? And you've probably heard the 21 days to create a habit. That came out of Maxwell Maltz psychocybernetics, and even into when they would, the phantom limb syndrome, if you like. So when people would be survivors of amputees, the brain just still thought that the limb was attached. And what they found was that it would take roughly 21 days for the brain to start to actually recognizing the limb wasn't there anymore. From that, which goes back, I think, way back into the 60s and 70s, we know now with the medical imaging that we do start to build neural pathways. If you repeat the same behavior every day for a minimum of 3 weeks, you start to build neural pathways. And the stronger these neural pathways become is about how many times you do it. So whenever you're going to start with practicing a new habit, you need to start small with one small thing. And I say to people, for example, if you want to start exercising, all I want you to do is not put on gym wear. I just want you to change your shoes and do a 2-minute walk outside and back again, and do that every day for 3 weeks. Everyone can do a 2-minute walk. So it has to be really easy, so easy that people go, it can't be that easy. We're not actually at that point building the habit, we're creating discipline. Until you've got the discipline, the habit's not going to come. So small steps repeated over a minimum of 3 weeks. But remember, the pathways of habits that you've built till now are still quite strong. So it takes a while for those habits and those neural pathways to knit and become stronger. So that's the first one. The longer that you can maintain it in small steps, the greater the change. In terms of managing stress with children, there's no one answer here. I could do a whole 1-hour session on this. But what I say is, in terms of the relaxation and the distraction activities, it's really important to incorporate your kids in this. What I used to find when my 3 boys were younger and they'd all start to get on each other's nerves, I would get out the Play-Doh, I'd get out the crayons and the scrapbooks, because by then they're getting on my nerves, and I'd say, okay guys, what we're going to do, we're all going to draw how we feel. So even the 2-year-old would get the crayon and we'd be drawing how we're feeling right now. Or we'd get the Play-Doh and we'd be squashing it because we're really stressed. Or we'd go out for a run. stress needs activity to diffuse. So that is the best thing at this point with the time that we have I could give you.
Yes, there's two more questions
any other
there,
questions?
and they're really useful ones. I'll start with William's, and then I'll go to Tracy's one. William asks, what's the one thing that a company should be doing to improve resilience in employees? I believe what the company should be doing is communicating better, communicating more effectively. I think one of the things to do is to go back and have a look at what's the communication like in the company. Are people being told things in a timely manner? Are decisions being made on the run? Are people feeling left out? Because I think information will build strength. Information basically helps us to plan, and it helps us to put things into perspective. And if your company's not giving you timely information, or changing information at the last minute, or not distributing that information effectively, that's going to create a lot of stress. And so I think it's important to go to the sections of the company that I suppose are responsible for the communication, or it might be in just certain areas or certain departments of the company, and ask them to have a look at how they're communicating things. I think that's really essential. And Tracy's asked about how to build resilience when you've already reached burnout. Karen, would you like to have a few comments on that?
Tracy, again, it probably will involve a process of getting professional support. When people have reached that burnout, at that stage, they're quite fatigued. I always say to people, the first thing I want you to do is go to your doctor and get your blood levels checked. I want to make sure that there's nothing else underlying that's going on. We know that stress contributes to many other lifestyle diseases, so that's what I'm checking for. People tend to respond well to that, in more so than saying go to a psychologist. But even when people do come to me, I ask them to get their blood levels checked, or when was the last time they had them checked. The next thing I check on is sleep. We really have to go back to basics when someone's reached burnout. Depending if they're still working or not, I think that's a critical factor. If they are still working, they're not probably doing their best work. I would talk to them about maybe taking some time off around that, some either stress leave. At this point in time, again, circumstances are very different. I have found that those who were reaching burnout prior to COVID have been able to take a breather. But we really have to go back to basics when someone is at that point of burnout. Good food, good sleep, and how do we get it? Because usually they're at the point where they're either exhausted during the day and can't sleep at night. So it's that treatment for insomnia. By that stage, they've developed insomnia. Getting their medical checkups done, and just very slow activity. Engaging those resources and keeping them connected, because another thing that can happen is people withdraw and isolate when they've reached that point in time. Number one, I'd say seeks professional support, but eating well and coming back to those real basic needs and getting those met.
And Tracy, I'd like to add to that. I can relate to your situation. When I was the head of the psychology unit with the police department, I was 24/7 on call for all kinds of critical incidents, and I found I was reaching that point myself. So what I had to do was partition off some time where I was able to give the phone to somebody else and actually do things like go to the park, spend time with the family, spend some time with friends. And it was essential to do that. It's essential to look at what are the contributors to how you're feeling and where you're at, and how can you partition those off. And sometimes people, especially people who've got their own practice, and it's very small in number, they don't have a lot of support networks around them, and that you've got to almost look at how can you isolate yourself for a time to give yourself some time to look after yourself. And I think that's absolutely essential, because the bottom line is a no-win situation. So it's doing something, doing anything just to make a start. That's important.
Perfect. Tracy, I'll just say one quick thing there. When you're working with people in that situation, just some simple practices of mindfulness can also help, and breathing strategies, just getting them to slow their breathing down in the moment and setting reminders for that. Like Michael said, having a plan. So what I'll do, I'll say to people, I want you to set your phone to go off 3 times a day. And obviously, if it's not appropriate at the time it goes off, you just reset that reminder. But just when it goes off, just taking 5 slow breaths. That's it. Do that 3 times a day. This is developing a habit, and that just allows people just to step back a bit. So they're in it. They might not want help at this stage, but they're trying to prevent burnout. Stop, pause, take 5, and just breathe.
Perfect. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Michael. Before we all exit, make sure you download the handouts, which are the PowerPoint slides and the articles that Michael mentioned. Another reminder for everyone, if you haven't already registered, we've got a dust control in construction webinar happening next Friday, so feel free to register. I know we've gone a little over time, but it was warranted with the session. So thank you, Michael and Karen, once again. I hope you guys enjoy your weekend ahead.
Thanks, everyone. All the best.
Thanks very much, Samira. Bye, everybody.
Bye.